Hello there and welcome back to our Orlando time-lapse series. In today's episode we will finally transition over to the other side of the main street, where we will start off with some layouting of that area and later on even start with the construction of that. So as you see here, the first thing I'm working on is this area between the railroad station and the beginning of this side of the main street. So in the next couple of minutes you will see me trying to get this area a lot more watertight and to make sure that we haven't there any immersion breaking hollow spots anymore. I mean, you can see me working here right now on the entrance tunnel on this side, and it's of course not finished. We will come back to this area when we creating the interior underneath the railroad station. But it's just the thing that I want to have a rock solid foundation here where we can build upon and where we don't have to work backwards all the time and we can just fully focus on this other side. So when we take a look on the actual functional element of this area, it's a lot different than the other side. On the other side you had there primarily the entrance to the railroad station, also for disabled people. So we had there a ramp that was very close attached to the elevated railroad track itself. Here we also have an elevated railroad track, but it's completely separated by foliage. And so one possible reason that I can think of why they wanted to leave this area like that, and maybe also the reason why they didn't put this ramp on this side but on the other side, is maybe just the fact that when you entering this area, so when the train is coming into the station, you have a nice side access there where you can look straight into the main street itself. And not only the main street, when you look to the other side, you see the outer park's borders. So you see the monorail station and the big lake in front of Orlando and pretty much the whole esplanade there. So my interpretation of this is actually that they want you to make a decision where you would like to go next. Do you stick within the park and go to Main Street maybe? Or do you like to go outside of the park and maybe ride the monorail or take a ferry boat? I mean, that's the big difference to Anaheim and the sheer beauty of Disney World. Since you aren't bound anymore to only this one park, you have there a whole connected network from this franchise with different parks and resorts and hotels that are in the near vicinity, that they almost perform like our own city, and where those different parks are like different districts within the city. I mean, think of Epcot, the Animal Kingdom, Wilderness Lodge, Hollywood Studios, Blizzard Beach Water Park, Disney Springs. I only mentioned a few of them, but there are so many different Disney-related locations around the Magic Kingdom that there is no question about that anymore why they called it Disney World in the end. It's a small world, right? And I think that's the main difference to Anaheim. In Anaheim you have only the main park and California Adventure below it. You also have their downtown and some hotels around this place. But you don't have nearly that much immersion in the sheer size of it like here in Orlando. You have a whole world here that is interconnected between, and where you can move with the monorail and with ferry boats between those locations, and where you don't have like Los Angeles pretty much right beside you. You aren't bound to the city anymore. So this space that you are visiting is geographically much more specifically designed for that, I think, than something like Anaheim. Just because you can expand the park over its park boundaries. And you can make this experience even more immersive by not only adjusting the look within the park, but actually adjusting even the landscape around the park itself. And if I imagine myself being a guest within this little own world, it is far more effective in the terms of creating immersion of this franchise when you don't have any boundaries there that will break down this immersion. I mean, think of any fantasy franchise there is, or any movie or game. Just imagine Skyrim maybe. When you would have in Skyrim, on the boundary of the map, like a completely different fictional world, then you would also say, what the heck is that, right? And you immediately lose the connection and the immersion to your fictional world there. And so it's of course of great importance to keep this immersion as high as you can have it within reality. And therefore I think Orlando is a prime example of that, and where you can see that they took now this idea of having a theme park even further and having our own little microcosmos there, or utopia, which is completely built around this franchise. And that's the beauty of Orlando, I think. So now you might question how to achieve this great immersion within this video game. I mean, right now I don't see any possible solution how you could actually build now all those different parks that surround the Magic Kingdom and connect them together. I mean, you can build them one by one, but you only would have then separate save games, and you would kinda think this world in your head as you loading through the parks, right? So the ultimate development stage or version of Planet Coaster, what this series could develop in the very future, could be something like multiple parks in one map that function like a microcosmos, like a utopia. And maybe even to the extent where you have water parks, you have your theme parks, and maybe even your zoos within this world space. This would be the vision of having an ultimate park simulation that is close to real life. But still, I think you could already make something very similar to that right now, if they would decide to increase the map size, for example. Still, you wouldn't have separate parks there that work like in real life and which have a gameplay functionality, but you would have at least the space for it to create them visually. And you might say now, well, this is all great and epic, but is it realistic to create something like that and at the same time keep it pretty performant that you can play the park at the end? Then I would tell you, of course, the same things that I talked about in the last episode. I would very recommend that you watch it, just because it concludes down this issue that we have this constant struggle against the performance, and where I now think that playability will be always there with the right technology in mind, that I think something like this could be realistic and possible to create. I mean, it kinda sounds insane to do something like that, but aren't we doing it already anyway? I mean, this whole project and also the Anaheim Park was built around this insanity and this madness. It's not the most average thing you would create within such a game, right? And I'm also pretty sure that most people would never think about something like that just because it sounds so insane to do that. I mean, if it's now insane or not, I do not know, and I don't even care too much about that. But what I'm caring about, and what I also found out since the beginning of Anaheim, was that whenever I was confronted by this huge wall of time and effort that I would have to spend to make even a slight bit of progress in the end, to have there a positive vision that keeps you going, even at times where you don't want to continue. And this vision was for me always this childish fascination of seeing a park that exists in real life built within a video game. So whenever I'm in this self-conflicting mode of saying, oh, you can't do that, it's too much detail, stop it, it's absolutely rubbish, then I reiterate this vision, and it always helps me in a way, I don't know. But maybe let's talk again about the footage you see. I got a little bit carried away here. So as you saw, I lay out it now the rough shapes of this area and where later those buildings will position themselves. And already you see it here, we started on the building in the middle of this site, the Town Square Theater. And you might be a little bit confused here why I'm starting now in the middle of this section of this side of the main street. And that's just because on this side you have there something happening that is quite remarkable, I think. And that is that throughout all of this site you have the same building elements pretty much appear on all those buildings. So it's not like on the other side where we had for each separate building a complete different building style. Here on this side they share the same building style throughout, and the only thing that is different is the arrangement and layouting, how those buildings interconnect to each other. So the most obvious feature of that would be that the building in the middle features 3 floors and the buildings on the side only 2 floors. And this formation gets even more emphasized by pushing those buildings on the side to the background, and the building in the middle steps forward. So there's a step back. But there's also something new that happens here that I did not mention yet. We have now this motive of having a colonnade, not only in those separated bridge elements like on the other side. They now become part of the facade of the building. They stretch themselves completely over the full width of this side of the main street. And not only that, they actually now define the facade. Their logic of spacing those columns in a specific distance to each other define where those entrances are happening later on, and where you have ramps and staircases. This might very well explain why I decided to start with the building in the middle, and especially on those columns, because they define pretty much this entire side of the main street. And that's kind of the plan here. Once we figured out how this column system actually works, then we can just reapply this system pretty much all over this side of the main street. And this should, at least in theory, speed up this process quite tremendously. As you see it in the footage, I spent a couple of minutes here on this column just to have it rock solid, since it's so important for this area later on. And the difficult part here was again the scaling. There are only a handful of pieces that I can think of that you can scale down to this level of scaleness. And it becomes even more trickier because you can see this column from all sides. So if this column, for example, would be on a wall, then you could use the wall to hide things behind it. But since those columns are standing on their own in front of the building, I have to double check each piece that I'm using to make sure that it don't stick out on the backside, for example. Later on you will see that problem also appearing when I'm creating the trim area on top of this column, and where I also have to double check each piece that I'm using that you can see it equally on both sides. For the actual pieces I used mainly wooden pieces just for the column itself, and added those trim corner stone pieces from the mythology pack, and I think they work pretty good in such scenarios where you have to work with a very tiny scaleness. So this piece is actually pretty vital for us, because I don't think we have there anything else that you can scale down so much and use as a little trim element that you can even use on corners. So as I'm recording right now, it's the 19th of March. So for me tomorrow, they will release the next update, update 3. Probably when I'm releasing this video, you already saw this update and maybe even tested for yourself. But man, I'm so hyped for that update. I can't wait anymore to finally see all those new pieces that we will get. I believe in the changelog they wrote about 350 pieces that they will add within this Western theme. They are all scalable. I mean, this is so insane. I'm so hyped about that. And the best thing out of that is that all those pieces, I already know them because they are from the prequel. So I don't have to get into it again and to learn all those pieces where they are within the browser and to memorize them just because they are already memorized from the prequel. And that's, I believe, the biggest thing for any creator that played the prequel, that you probably won't have any trouble to get started with that. The only new thing will be that you can scale them, and this will open up a whole new universe how to use those pieces from the prequel. Back then I loved the Western theme especially for its flexibility, so not necessarily now to create your Western town, I mean that's surely great, but you can use those wooden elements pretty much everywhere in your park. If it's now an adventure themed area or a fantasy one, pretty much all where you have wood. And within a theme park, there are a lot of areas where you have wood. And especially on a main street. And there I'm coming back to our park. I can't emphasize how crucial and perfect this timing actually is that we now receive something like that. I mean, just guess of which materials the main street is built out of. Stone, brickwork and wood. A lot of wood. Which is of course painted. But again, it's absolutely perfect that we now receive this free update. It will make the building process a lot more comfortable for me, I think, and it gives us also much more variation and creative freedom how to create details. I mean, the more pieces we will get in this game, the better, right? But I think this is only partly true. It heavily depends which pieces you add to the game. How scalable are they? Which form do they have? Are they colorable? And how much theming is on them? If you have like 100 pieces on a very specific theming, maybe a specific robotic dinosaur or something like that, then I can barely make use out of them compared to a set of architectural trim elements, for example. So in retrospect, you could kinda say and categorize all items in the game via our ranking system, where you rank each item in the game and its usability and its flexibility. So when I would have to categorize all those items in a new order, I would first of all divide them between themed items and unthemed items, and after that categorize this ranking how complex each item is. Is it only a box or is it a sculpture? So in general, more pieces are better, but when I think of a very efficient way how to deal with something like that in a game, I would always say reduce down this palette of items that you have so that you can quick and easily build something. I mean, there's nothing worse than to spend unnecessary time endlessly scrolling down to the browser to find the perfect piece, and you see all those wall sets and wall pieces that you probably won't use in the near future anyway, and where you just see that there are still many things that could be managed a lot more efficiently in the end. But it's just my very own issue, and I don't want to reproach or blame here anybody, because I think for the majority of players right now in Planet Coaster, the system how they categorize pretty much all items in the game is actually pretty good. It's just our issue because we come from the perspective of a pure builder, which doesn't care about any playability at all, and where it's only about the effectiveness in the end to build something. But I think the best out of those two worlds would be a proper folder structure, so that you can label up things and make your own folders and rename them, and this would just overall make this whole experience a lot more customizable and efficiently. Right now I'm doing my best and keeping all those items that I use very often in my favorites list, but already I can feel that it's kinda messy and completely cluttered there. And one thing is for sure, that it probably won't get better with more pieces in the game. And so therefore I would appreciate that there might be a different sorting system that would help in building much more efficiently in the end. But maybe at this point, let's get back to the build. As you see, we figured out now how to create this column framework, and from here on, it's a lot easier to continue just because the autopilot is kicking in and we simply follow this construction logic. However, while creating that, I was concerned, or maybe not concerned, but I cared a lot about the right proportion of this whole building. Since even a slight change in the height of it would create a much different proportion, and it would even affect the building on the side of it, since they share all of those same columns. So it was massively important here to find the right length and height of those columns, so that the spacing between them would also have the right proportion in the end, and that the whole thing would look like the one like in reality. So to give you some measures here, the overall height of the building in the middle is about 8 meters. Then we have the elevation of the foundation of this terrace that is about 70 centimeters, and the actual width of this block in the middle is about 16 meters. You also have there 7 openings, and the 3 in the middle are pushed forward even. So you have again there this concept that you emphasize the middle of the building, that you know where the entrance is. So you have again this visual storytelling just by the architecture itself. And so those pushbacks or push-outs are quite interesting because they are pretty much in the exact width of those columns. You have always there not a single column, you have always a pair of them. And so those pushbacks are achieved by turning this pair 90 degrees, and there you have your next level where you step back in the facade pretty much. So already on the left side you can see that this column system now transitions into the building on the left side, which is by the way Tony's Town Square restaurant, and where you can dine underneath this colonnade. I mean, later on we will build even the furniture for that and place some tables and seats there where you can enjoy your Italian meal. I can very well imagine that this topic will be quite interesting in the future, since in update 4 that they announced they will implement those restaurants. And so I read some comments about that where you guys already told me that something like this is actually a feature within Planet Zoo already. And so I completely didn't know that, just because I didn't touch Planet Zoo for years now. I mean, for me the perfect solution would be that you could just place down invisible boxes and pretty much the guest knows, okay, this is a seat. Then you could just use your custom scenery for that, right? And it would look so much more better, I think, than to use those pre-made benches or tables that you have right now in the game. And for me at least, they are much too themed that I use them. So I can already see that the solution they go with is probably a much simplified version of that, where you don't use your custom scenery for that. You just have pre-designed tables and seats that you place down, and then you designate them to your restaurant. So when it's something like that, it's probably not usable for us, just because they would intercollide with our own scenery for that. But maybe if there is some mod creator out there, this would be a perfect situation on creating a mod, so that you could actually make those pre-designed seats and tables that have this gameplay functionality, that you could actually make them invisible, and then I can just build my own seats and tables around that. I mean, you know me by this point, that I don't like so much mods within this game. Normally I love them for other games like Skyrim or Fallout, but those games I play them for myself. Here it's a different story, just because you, as a creator of this park, you share it with the community, and you would have to rely on the community now. Oh, you need this mod, you need that mod, You have to be there pretty cautious to install that in the right way. And so it's just a thing that I like it very quick and easy, so that you can just load the park and it's there. But at least for this idea of creating now a mod that you could actually make those restaurants now visible on the outside as well, I mean, this would add so much immersion in the end, I think. And if you wouldn't bother to install that, well, then you don't install that. It's just simple as that. You would see then some clipping there where the pre-made benches and tables and seats would clip into my custom scenery that I made for those restaurants. But it's really a small difference. Much smaller than maybe that scaleness mod, right? That scales pretty much everything down to 10% or something like that, which is absolutely insane when you apply that to the whole park, right? Then pretty much everything you build will look completely different than you intended it. But still, I don't want to sound here too negative about mods. I actually love mods, but it's just the lacking integration within Planet Coaster. When you take a game, for example, like City Skylines, they have their dedicated workshop for that, set within Steam, that not only features now creations, but actually scripted mods, so that they alter the gameplay actually. In Planet Coaster 1 we had at least the Steam workshop only for creations and blueprints, and this got replaced now by the Frontier workshop, which is, in my opinion, pretty horrible. Just because you lack there many very easy features that you had in Steam, like when you want to release your creation now only for friends or people that have a link to your creation and where your creation itself is unlisted from the workshop. I mean, something like that is currently not possible. You only have a half-baked solution, I would say here, with this collaboration mode, where you can invite 4 other people, but then they get the status of a collaborator, and that means that they can also edit and save the park, and when they do that, you can't actually access it. So you have to revoke their editing all the time when you want to make a change yourself. And this is of course something, as a creator of this park, I absolutely don't want. And especially also only to 4 people. I mean, come on, this is just not great. I would have to create multiple copies to share this park to a wider audience. But to be fair here, this is of course not the reason how you are meant to play this collaboration mode. I see that, of course. You normally just invite your friends and you build a park together. Therefore you have this mode, right? But at least this could be kinda a temporal solution on how you share your park to a selected audience. And so therefore I hope that they in the future will implement such functionality that you can share your park also to your friends and people that have just this share code and where your actual creation is kinda unlisted from the workshop. But I would like to come back to this Frontier workshop. And so I think they made now their own version of this workshop primarily because they offer this crossplay element that you can play Planet Coaster not only on your PC but also now on your PlayStation or Xbox. And I mean, well, I can understand that, of course, that you want to go for much more platforms to play this game and to make it in that regard much more accessible for those players. But why do we see on the other hand so many limitations and removement of features that we already had in the Steam workshop in the prequel? I mean, think about Planet Coaster for a second. What's the game actually about? It's about your creations. It's giving you creative tools to express yourself within a theme park sim and to upload those creations to a workshop that is accessible by the community. So you have this socializing element there that is pretty important, I think. It's pretty much a core element of this game. And so why do we see so many things lacking here? For example, why can't I comment anymore under those creations like in the Steam workshop? Maybe I want to tell the creator what a cool build this has become. The only interactive part right now is to rate the creation, and pretty much that's it. Another thing that is quite mind-boggling is just the sheer lack of providing any images or videos to your creation. You are bound to this one thumbnail that you have to pre-plan even before uploading your creation to the workshop. In the prequel, we could just upload multiple images and even attach a video to it. So all those expression methods are sadly gone, and you only are stuck to this thumbnail and your description. And so when I realized that, it made me kinda sad, because we had so many tools there to express ourselves and to tell people what our creation is about. And so at least for me, this workshop feels kinda artificial and very non-personal, because it lacks core functionality to proper showcase your park and to interact with the community. So in the future, I know that they announced in the 4th update in April that they will add some extra features to the workshop. If it's now a comment box or the ability to upload images and maybe even a video, we don't know. But at least this kind of tells us that they are working on something and that they are aware that their workshop is not perfect. But so far I think I talked enough about this topic. I think you getting my point here. And also I don't want to be overly nitpicky. I know they working hard on this game, and where they provide each month another free update, which costs us nothing in the end. And I mean, this fact alone tells pretty much everything here. So at this point, let's come back to the build. As you see, we made now quite a lot of progress in this area. As I said before, you also see now this issue with the trim area, where you have to double check each piece so that they don't stick out on the other side. So for example, those round elements that you see on the top of those columns. I used those disc clamps for that, and they fitted so perfectly since they are so thin and you can hide them pretty much there within this colonnade. So at this stage, the colonnade is almost finished, and I started on thinking which details I could still add here, and maybe the most interesting detail for us here is this ceiling fan, since it's moving and rotating. And so this is the first opportunity for us now to create something via this piston element. It was a little bit tricky to find here the right pieces for that. I used some coaster support pieces, but also the resort lamp on the bottom there. But since I was now in this piston mode, I could activate this rotational symmetry mode. And especially those pedals here fitted so perfectly for this ceiling fan. And when you see it in real time rotating, I think it looks absolutely great. And also the speed of it is pretty realistic, I think. And so I'm pretty happy now that I finally used this piston as it meant to be. And I hope those ceiling fans will give this area much more excitement, just because you have there now something that is not only static, there's actually something moving here. But yeah, so at this point I'm starting with the seats and tables. And so I thought that I might use those metal pieces again, just because earlier I used them as well on those benches. And since those seats are probably made out of metal also in the real world, it makes kind of sense to use them. And the first thing that I try to establish here is a scaling reference. Therefore I just use those stone figures to have here any kind of sense for the right scaling in general. So in theory, when something like a mod could happen, and what I talked about earlier, then I could actually now construct this chair around those pre-made benches and use actually a sitting guest for that reference. But at least for now, I think it's fine that we stick to a very generic seat and table set that we can reuse in the park itself in other restaurants that will come along. And so something that I found quite interesting here, since we have now this constrained space here, that we have to see how high the capacity actually can be for our guests that dine within this restaurant, right? Or to say it in simpler terms, how much tables and seats can we get within this space? How many people can eat here? So in the end, I believe I had space for 12 table groups, 6 of them with 4 seats and 6 of them with only 2 seats. So overall, we should have here a capacity of 36 guests. And I mean, remember, this is only probably a small chunk of the overall capacity of the whole restaurant, since most of it is in the interior, and where I can imagine that those seats on the outside are maybe the most wanted seats where you would like to sit on. Since there's of course a special quality attached to them, when you sit here pretty much at the heart of the main street, maybe ordering some of your favorite food, and while you are waiting for that, lean back, relax, breathe in, and realize that you at this very moment sit on one of the most favorite and beautiful places that there are in the whole Magic Kingdom. Maybe at some day, when I have the chance to go there myself, I would order here a table, and I will tell you about that, how my feeling, my experience, and how the food was. With that said, I think I want to conclude today's episode. We talked today a lot about this side of the main street, and we made quite a good progress now on this other side. You could say we laid out the foundation for it. With that said, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, subscribe, like or comment, join our Discord server, watch my other videos about Anaheim or Orlando, and thank you for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.